Okay, you guys are all here for independent contractor determination process. I want to welcome and thank Tara and Jessica for collaborating with us and bringing this training to all of you. And thank you for registering. I will hand it off to Tara and Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tara Garcia. I'm the Director of Employment Services. I do oversee the compensation services area that has implemented the determination process that we'll review with us today. And then I have with me Jessica Johnson. She's our analyst here in Comp Services, and she is the person that built out the process and answers all sorts of questions regarding the process as well. So we have a set of slides that we'll go through. We have some time at the end for questions and possibly a demo of the Smartsheet that we use for the process. And again, like Brenda said, some of you might have already heard this presentation, so you'll hear it again. So we'll get started. So this is a new process for our campus. The Chancellor's Office implemented this policy to determine when individuals are performing a service, whether they can be employed as an independent contractor or not. All 23 campuses have a similar determination process in place right now. So we have had to update our process and policy in regards to hiring individuals to do contract work. And we set up a determination to do that. So before we get started in how to do that, the employee versus an independent contractor, the very definition of an employee. You can see it here on the screen, but basically an employee is someone how we tell them the work that they need to do, the deliverables they need to give. We give them the tools to do the job. And they basically work in our offices, all of that. So we guide the work. They don't do the work for others. We're their sole institution where they do the work for. And then an independent contractor is an individual who renders a service to us where they typically have their own workspace, they have their own materials. We let them know what we want and they give us a deliverable. So they have a scope that they're working with, but they're at their own pace to do it. They can hire other individuals to do it along with them. They have the ability to work as independently, basically. And at the same time, an individual cannot be both an employee and an independent contractor. And there are very few instances where a person can be an independent contractor, which is why we set up this determination process. And if at any time you have any questions or if I'm going too fast, just like raise your hand or something very informal here. So the policy overview is basically under federal law and under a state assembly bill. We are now needing to use a single test to determine whether a person can work as an independent contractor. That test came out of the Dynamex case out of the California Supreme Court. And so we've aligned our process to make sure that we're aligned with the Dynamex test with federal and state laws. So for this, now, anytime you have someone, an individual, not a company, an individual doing service work for you, you will need to complete an independent contractor determination form. Once that form is complete, then you'll be notified as to whether or not you'll be going through a contract request through contracts and procurement, or you're going to be hiring that individual through either a staff hire or a faculty hire, depending on the nature of the work. Okay. The determination form and the process sits in our office here in HR&IE. And as a reminder, as always, no work can be started until you either have a contract in place or you have an offer letter for that individual. It's important that we classify everyone correctly, and we'll go through the some of the rules around this in a minute. But if we misclassify a worker as an independent contractor, there could be serious benefits and financial penalties to the institution, tax consequences, so on and so forth. So it's really important that we have everyone complete the process and that we're really classifying people correctly. And I know that a lot of people have had people work as independent contractors in the past. That does not mean going forward, they will still be identified that way. So just know things might change. We might have a lot of questions for you going forward in terms of your request form. Anything in the request form, we might have to go back to you and ask questions on. And it's not because we want to hold up your process, it's just we want to make sure we're classifying people correctly. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Jessica in a minute so she can show you the determination form, but we're using Smartsheet, which has outlined in it the Dynamex tests questions that will go through and determine these three things. So under the Dynamex test, a person is presumed to be employee unless the three following are met. So basically the work is free from control, like I mentioned before. The work is performed outside the usual course of work here at the university. So what does that mean? So if the work is regularly completed by a university employee, they cannot be an independent contractor. If the work is covered under a collective bargaining agreement, in most cases, they cannot be hired as an independent contractor. They will be hired as an employee. Now, there is some caveats there under another exemption to this rule, and we do review those once you submit the forms to us. So if there is some sort of caveat to the Dynamex test, we will use another test called Borello to find out if we're able to have that person work as an independent contractor. And then the third thing is that the work, the individual usually performs this work for others. So this is their established trade. This is what they do. And so those three things come into play when we're determining whether they're an independent contractor or not. And also, a person cannot be an independent contractor if they are a state employee currently, so or recently separated, which is 2 years. So if someone is currently working at any CSU, any other state agency, because the state controller's office views us as one employer, they cannot be hired as an independent contractor. They will need to be hired as an employee. How would you know? You're going to ask your individual whether they are recently separated or currently work for a state agency, and then you will notate that on the form. Any questions so far? Or do you want us to all just keep going through it? Keep going through it? All right. Jessica, you want to go ahead and go over the request form?
Yeah. And if time permits at the end, I'll show you the form. For now, I'm just gonna hit a couple of quick points. So when you go to our website, there is a link for the form. You can find us through the HRE website, compensation services, and you'll see a link for the independent contractor website. I also have the link here. Later, we can go over that. So you'll open it up and you'll be greeted with a kind of primitive knowledge about the determination form. Once again, a reminder, these requests must be reviewed prior to any work being performed. So again, like Tara said, we're not trying to delay the process or anything, just the more information you can give us up front and the sooner you can complete this, the sooner we can process everything so that way we can get to where you need to be. This questionnaire has mostly the Dynamex test, as we mentioned before, also known as the ABC test, questions specifically geared toward that, as well as some of the Borello test, which falls into those exemptions. And once you complete this form, depending on the scope of work and depending on any fact finding we might do at a later time, that determination may be subject to change. It's not saying that it will or will not, just it might be depending on if we find out any additional information. Let's say we ask for clarification for something and there's a little more to that, it may change. And also, once we make the determination, if you go to your respective area, if they find something that might be different, it could change. So it's going to give you a portion for requester information where you'll fill out your information. Then it'll go into vendor information. That's the individual that you would be wanting to do the work, and you'll put in their information. There is a box as well, because I know we've had the question before about bulk request. So let's say you have multiple people doing the same type of work. There is a box now where you can select that. Yes, I have, 3 different individuals that are going to be doing the same kind of work, let's say. So you'll be able to select that box, add in those additional names and emails, or you can even upload a file. Let's say you have a spreadsheet of some workers that you want to go through this process. And then it'll scroll down to here where you'll put in, date, payment information, the dates from and to. Let's say you have 2 different events over a span of time, you would just put the time frame. And this is where this also gets important, that detailed scope of work or description of services. We ask that you make it as thorough as possible. It doesn't have to be a novel, but maybe a paragraph or 2 explaining deliverables that you'll be receiving. Deliverables can be basically those things that you're expected to receive from the individual by the end of the work. I know I've told people a couple times when I get a very vague reference, add in things like the type of event that's being handled. If this event's occurred before, if this is like an annual thing versus a one-time, first-time thing. Information about the individual that you're hiring, whether or not this is something that they do for work on a regular basis, as that is one of the questions. Just any pertinent details that you think would help to be able to make that decision. Let's say, for example, you say, I want a painter to paint a mural. Well, okay, I understand that you want a painter to paint a mural, but it can be hard to determine what kind of work that is and whether or not it'll fall in the guidelines. So you want to make sure that you're adding in as much detail as possible. And also too, depending on where you go, they might ask for this information later in the process. So it's almost behooves you to think about adding in that detailed scope of work at the beginning so you already have it prepared for you. I know I've also seen where some people have the individual prepare their scope of work. You can ask them for what deliverables they're going to be expected to do and have them right. But again, you just want to make sure that it's as thorough as possible and that it's not vague, and you actually insert some of the information and more pertinent details that we would need to make a better determination. And so once you pass all this, you'll start the form. The first 5 questions, as you see here, they're strictly those first 3 tenements of the Dynamex test. If you need all 3 of them in order to even be considered an independent contractor. So once you are not falling in line with one of those 3, it's going to automatically kick you into being an employee. And I'll show you later in the next slide what those responses will look like. But essentially, it's just those same 3. Have they worked at a state institution or anywhere else before? Is this something that they regularly do for work? Is this different from the regular course of business at the CSU? So these first 5 questions are more or less filter questions, so to speak, so you don't have to complete the entire form. Because if these first 3 aren't met, you wouldn't be considered a contractor at any rate. So it's just to help kind of tidy up the process so that way you're not spending time filling out a form when you know this person would be considered an employee. But once you pass all these, it'll also open up the form where they ask more in-depth questions, ask more Borello test questions. It's about 20 or so total questions, 23, I believe, including these. And again, it's just going over from the legislation what we would need to consider them one or the other. And at the very end, there's going to be a signature box. You're just checking to say that you've done your vetting. So you've talked to this individual, you've found out, that they weren't a state employee within the last 2 years, that this is something they regularly do. This is something that the university doesn't already have as a classification or in any bargaining unit agreement. You've done kind of your process, and to the best of your knowledge, this is who they are. It's not to hold you completely accountable. You're just saying that to the best of your knowledge, this is what I know. You'll hit the date and you'll hit submit. I receive it, I review it, then Tara will review it, and that's when you'll get your determination.
I do have a question regarding the signature box.
Yeah.
So there's a word in there that says authority. Yep. So some of us don't have, if we're entering this form, we don't have the authority to oversee this work being performed. We're just
Yeah.
simply entering the form. Is there another word we could put in there?
We could take a look at that, Crystal. Yeah, we're whoever's submitting this form, we're under the assumption that you are working with a vendor, knowing kind of what is happening, what kind of service they're providing, things like that. So we just need to make sure who's ever entering the form has that information, has acknowledged that information, and the information is true and correct. So yeah, we could take a look at that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So once you complete the form and once we also go over and review, you'll receive one of two. Those first 5 questions, you will immediately see this employee determination review if you don't pass one of those 5 questions. Again, that's your Dynamex basic. So if you don't pass any of those, you wouldn't be considered an independent contractor. You'd immediately go into an employee determination. Either one, you're going to see it come from California State University system via Smartsheet. It won't be coming directly from us. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if it ever would go to your junk folder or anything, but if you don't see anything from me, check your junk. It should be coming via Smartsheet. It won't necessarily come directly from our inbox. And it gives you information. It'll have the date that you submitted it as well as the person's name. And it'll give you just a brief rundown of where to go next in the process. And it's basically, they would be the ones reaching out to you, and that's where you would get kind of going. And same thing with independent contractor. You'll see the determination. It'll have it from the date that you submitted it, the person's name, and again, it'll give you just kind of a brief rundown of what to do next, your next steps. And then you would be reaching out to that person and you'll take it from there. Again, just another brief slide on what would happen. Let's say you found out that they're an employee, your next steps, whether it's going to be a staff or faculty hire. Book hire information is here as well. This is all on our website. And also if they're a determinate contractor, some of the things that you might have to do, but again, that's a process through contracts and procurement. Once we make the determination, you will be going on to either or and finishing the process with them. If you have any questions, you can always reach out. This is our inbox, IDC determination at fullerton.edu, or you can give me a call. For the contracts and procurement team, they also have their inbox here. You can also visit our website, which I don't know, Tara, should I go to it right now?
I put it in the chat as well, so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can always just click on that and it should, I think, open. Yes. And this is where you can get some more information about the Dynamex test, the Borello requirements. We also have the tech letter, which has some information as well. Processing instructions. So I don't know, let's say a month from now, you need to fill this out and you just need a refresher. You'll have some information there as well. The workflow, FAQs, which I find a little helpful personally, even when I just need a mental refresh. This was some general questions that I've gotten, general questions that I've had myself. Some of the things in the language that might be a little tricky. If you have any questions while you're filling out the form or need any insight, I've recommended people read through some of these so it can help you. And obviously it also has the link to the request form. So once you hit that, you'll be open to the form. This multiple requests is the thing that I had mentioned before. So you would hit yes if you had more than one person doing the same type of work. And you can add in names here, or you can upload a file. Let's say you had it on a list, like on a spreadsheet. And that's it for me. I think we're going to be opening it up to questions. I can stop sharing my screen and we can just start answering some questions if anyone has anything.
And I believe our friends in contracts and procurement are also on if anybody has any questions in regards to the process once it's determined as an independent contractor.
That is correct, Tara. Thank you.
Mhm.
We're open for any questions you might have as how we interconnect between the two departments and what we're looking for when processing your requisitions.
I have a question. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
This could be for contracts and procurement, but I'm a newer team member, and these trainings are really helpful for me, especially. But I was wondering about a purchase order. Is this process necessary for like all purchase orders, or is it only, specifically the independent contractors?
It's specifically to the service orders that might be dealing with an independent contractor. So if you're buying, a commodity service blanket order or just widgets in a sense, Sarah, you don't have to complete this form.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question in the chat from Kira. Does staff need to submit independent contractor approval request for approved vendors?
I think, Tara, that might be a yes in a sense because the status might change, right? We don't
Correct.
know if they're engaged, not necessarily with another CSU, but another state agency. And so, Kara, we do need that just to make that determination.
Correct.
Yes. And then I guess a quick note about that too. From what I understand, businesses doing work. I know someone was asking for brief examples. So I had one for, I guess, that sense where they listed someone's name, but they were using like a party service to complete all of the work, not just the one person. So in that sense, it's a business, they're an approved vendor. They wouldn't have to go through this process because they're a business and this is for individuals only. But also, from what I understand, if they're already approved, they already probably have a contract in standing. So that would just be strictly correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be a contract thing.
Right. Again, this is for individuals performing a service, not performing a service as part of a company or established vendor, individuals performing a service. So, for example, a lot of them that are coming through, especially now, would be a guest speaker, right? We wouldn't hire them as a guest speaker if, as an employee, if they're speaking on to our students, let's say, they're not teaching our students, but they're speaking to them on how to get a job in the career field. And so that would be considered more of an independent contractor than an employee. But cases are different. So that's why we want to make sure everybody's completing this if they have an individual performing a service type work.
And to dovetail off of that, Tara, if in purchasing we get a requisition, there has a valid vendor ID, but it's made out to an individual and the service description is for guest speaker or honorarium, we're going to ask that you complete this process if you do not attach the HR&IE's determination or, a Smartsheet determination from this process. So we're working, hand in glove with Tara and her team, even so to the point where we're getting emails of the determination as well. But again, we do ask you to submit that with your requisition, along with the scope of work and any other pertinent information that you feel might help expedite the processing of your service order.
I think another example that we've seen more recently has been guest artists as well and guest performers. So again, an individual and they're being asked to perform this single event one time, and it's a very specific scope. They're not getting any instruction besides, obviously where it is and let's say the music piece or whatever they're doing, but it's pretty much their own work and they're going to be the ones performing. They're not getting any instruction or any training from the CSU. They're not providing any instruction as well. So these guest artists and performers, they're working alongside, not necessarily with them. You almost have to think of it as how independent is this person that you're trying to hire versus how much control do you have, is what I also explained to somebody. Because I know sometimes the questions can be a little tricky. But you almost have to think of it as if this person in their day-to-day. Let's say, I think I had the painting example earlier. So let's say you need a mural painted on one of the buildings, right? Obviously, there's painters. Obviously, you can get maintenance to do something. But if I'm getting a very specific project done, this person has full control. They're providing their own materials. They are not getting any training or any recommendation from me. They're just going to complete this job. One of the questions asks about whether or not the termination of this contract will be a loss or a gain for them. So they're able to leave at will. Let's say something's not working out. It's not going to be any loss to either party. For that to be an independent contractor versus like, I don't know, let's say there's a scuff on the wall and I need it painted. Well, there's people on campus that can do that work to repair a wall or to fix something. So I guess that's kind of how I've seen it, is how much independence does this individual have that I'm trying to bring on versus how much am I controlling and dictating their work. That's going to be the biggest kind of figuring out, is how much autonomy does this person have versus how much am I relinquishing to them.
Okay, so
So
go
Lynn
ahead.
Tran has a question, but more for me is she's asking if does this need to be filled out for honorariums as well?
No, there's a process for honorariums. So honorariums are a little different. Honorariums is not a service. So there is a policy and process in place already for honorariums that you would go through for this. This would be for people who are performing a service.
And the honorarium, to dovetail Tara as well, is based out of accounts payable. They have an actual form that you complete there, because technically, right, there's not supposed to be said a quote or proposal. It's a guess. It's a guess and a price that the university give, and not necessarily a quote from this particular guest speaker.
So like a token of appreciation for them coming to speak or whatever the case may be. There is a policy and an outline for that you can follow. And then go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to do another question from the chat. An individual is performing a service from an approved vendor. So if the individual only is performing a service, then yes, you would still complete the independent contractor form. When you say from an approved vendor, if it's an individual from, like, let's say a business, and if it's already approved vendor, you're contracting with the business, not the individual.
That is correct. I'm expecting the requisition to have the business name, and the proposal will be from the actual business letterhead, right? They're sending a representative from that company, but from our interpretation, we're dealing with a corporation or company at that time.
So we would not need, in that case, to fill out the IDC form. It's only if an individual is performing the service on their own. Does that make sense?
Like, I guess to make it, oh, okay.
Got it.
Because I was going to say, yeah, I had someone where it's like this person, and then in the scope of work, they're like, this company is doing this, and this person is going to do
So just
this.
think of it as individuals performing a service to the university.
I think I've had this question and I kind of half answered it, but maybe since Alex is here, he can also give me some insight. I've had a question about frequency too. So obviously some people are concerned with, you know, if I have this individual and I've done this process, let's say, and they're a contractor, if I'm going to be needing them for multiple things, like, am I going to have to do this every single time? Like, how does that work? And I think what I had mentioned to someone was it's going to be dependent on that next step. So basically, however that contract is, let's say you have it for a certain amount of time, or if it's just this event. So I don't know, Alex, if you can give any insight on that, because I know I've had that question where how frequent do we have to do this if let's say I've already gotten this approved, but maybe I want to use this person in the future. How does that look?
It also has to do with the span of time that you established the open service order or PO with the individual or corporation, right? Just because things change. What if we only did a service order for a period of 6 months, but within those 6 months, this individual has gotten a state agency or is contracting with a state agency? We would have to do it again. So I would say if you've only, if you're resubmitting a new service order request within a month or two, maybe you could be okay. But anything outside of that time frame, I think we do need to go through the process, because a lot of variables could change, even under vendor data record form. They could be registered with the state as a sole proprietor or something different.
Thank you.
And yeah, and mainly, Jessica, I think a lot of that has to do with annual maintenance renewals during the fiscal year. So
Yeah.
we get a lot of that. So if you just because you did it last fiscal year doesn't mean you shouldn't think about doing it in the renewal of a fiscal year period.
Any other questions? Can't see, and if anybody, no one has their hands raised. Or, okay. Well, if there's no other questions, you know where to find us. I believe the presentation will be sent out, but Jessica and I are always available to answer any questions you may have. There is a survey link that Brenda put in the chat, so if you all would be able to open that up now and complete that survey, we would really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best this week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you.